Talk Back with Bharati Jagdish and Daniel Martin on 938 Live.
Now, welcome to the final edition of Talk Back Town Hall. It's a special series where our ministers have been answering your questions on policy issues. Our guest is Minister of State for Education and Defence, Lawrence Wong. Today, the focus on more opportunities in higher education for Singaporeans for a more inclusive society. Now, first of all, Mr. Wong, much has been said about the many pathways that we are building, that we might have already to meet the different interests, aptitudes and abilities of our students. Would you be able to give us an idea of how the ministry can cater to these and what's in the pipeline?
We are doing many things to invest in our higher education sector. And our priority is to expand opportunities for all students in higher education or tertiary education. For those who prefer a more practice-oriented, hands-on learning pathway, we have our ITE and Polytechnics. I visit the ITE and Polytechnics regularly, and each time I go, I'm always struck by the enthusiasm, the passion of the students, the dedication and commitment of the staff, and also the quality of the facilities we have invested in these institutions. They are world-class institutions and they are admired internationally. We have invested in these institutions. We will continue to invest in them to ensure that they provide high-quality learning for students who prefer a more hands-on approach. Then we have our university sector, which is growing rapidly, and we are also expanding places. This year we have 1,000 places for university students, and then in the coming years we are increasing by another 1,000 places. But we are not only expanding our university sector in terms of places, but also in terms of quality. And we have, over time, provided more quality, more diverse offerings. We now have 4 autonomous universities, NUS, NTU, we have SMU and the latest SUTD. And within these institutions, we also have new programs like the Yale NUS Liberal Arts College, as well as the Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine in NTU. And we have created the SIT, Singapore Institute of Technology, which provides degree opportunities for polytechnic students who seek to get a degree education. And so our university sector has grown, it has expanded over the years, and there will be more opportunities for students seeking to get a degree education. And I'm presently chairing a committee to see how we can further expand our university sector. And we see this review not just as an opportunity to increase the number of university places even more, but also to develop a new model of university excellence that can further diversify our university offerings and also give Singaporeans more options to pursue a quality degree education in Singapore. So overall, if you look at our higher education sector, whether you are in university, whether you are in Polytechnic or ITE, or even if you were to go to work first and then pursue a diploma or degree later, there will be many opportunities for young Singaporeans to learn, to upgrade, not just once off, but throughout their lifetimes. And by doing so, we hope to create an education that has many pathways, that has no dead ends, that creates many opportunities to excel, so that our children, our young Singaporeans, have a fair chance to fulfill their promise, to go as far as they can in what they are good at.
Now, during the budget debate earlier this year, Mr. Wong, Education Minister Heng Swee Keat told Parliament that about 93% of students progress to post-secondary education. Talk to us about the strengths of our higher education system. You talked about the quality and the investment that does go in, but the actual strength and quality of that higher education, what do you say?
I think the quality would manifest itself in the demand for our students, because the products of our education system are our students. And if you look at our students, they are in high demand. Out of 10, more than 90% of them, whether ITE, polytechnics or universities, get jobs within 6 months of graduation. Across the entire landscape, whether it's ITE, polytechnic or universities, we have very close links with industry. We ensure that the curriculum is relevant. Our infrastructure, our facilities, we have invested in them, so they are quality facilities and infrastructure. We have dedicated teachers across all institutions who care about teaching the students. So overall, when you look at the strengths of our system, we are able to provide very high quality holistic education for our students. And if you look at how our students do in terms of when they participate in international competitions, they do very well. ITE and Polytechnic students, for example, participate in something called a World Skills Competition. This is an international competition that competes on the basis of skills. And our ITE and Polytechnic students compete with teams from Germany, from Switzerland, from France, all over the world. And this year they won many gold medals. which shows that their skills, when they benchmark against the best in the world, they are able to benchmark themselves and they are able to do very well.
Now, speaking of the quality of graduates, I think the ministry received some feedback not too long ago from CEOs of major corporations who said that it seems that our graduates lack a certain drive. How can we address those other qualities then?
Something we are very conscious of, that education is not just about knowledge and content, but we also want to instill broader competencies, generic skills, whether we are talking about drive, creativity, the ability to collaborate in teams, a spirit of innovation and enterprise. I think these are very important competencies that would go beyond the specific content knowledge that a student knows. And so we are trying very hard across our institutions of higher learning to see how we can inculcate these competencies. And this can be done outside of the curriculum, for example, giving students more overseas experiences, giving students an opportunity to participate in community projects, giving them real-world problems, for example, in terms of project learning, so that they actually come together in teams to do more problem-solving, more project-based group work. So there are different ways in the pedagogies, in the approach that in the institutions we are trying to instill these broader generic competencies which we see as critical for our students to succeed in the future.
Mr. Wong, we do know that we are living in an environment of quickly changing dynamic needs in terms of the economies and the industries and the business, and a lot of people talked about how in the past you'd have one job for your whole life and now you might have multiple careers. Our young people need to be prepared for that and whatnot. So in view of these changing needs that we're seeing in the Singaporean landscape, how well prepared are our graduates to face these needs of Singapore?
The needs of the economy are continuously changing, and I think our mindset should be that learning is lifelong. It does not stop with getting a diploma or with a degree. That's why we are also in MOE doing our best to expand our CET, continuing education and training offerings. For a student who is a graduate, a degree or diploma graduate, there will be continuous pathways for them to learn, upgrade themselves, and they can do that. They can go back to a polytechnic, for example, to get a part-time diploma. They can pursue a part-time degree if they wish to. I think important for students or for adult learners to continue to upgrade themselves, because the needs of the economy will change, the needs of the workplace will change, and if they have that mindset that learning does not stop when you have a degree, but you continually need to upgrade yourself, then I think our Singaporeans will be well prepared for challenges in the workplace.
Young people today are increasingly also finding out that they want to start businesses very early and be entrepreneurial and be the next Mark Zuckerberg straight out of school. Some people even think that they can do it before they graduate. That's a changing need as well, I would imagine. Young people seeking achievement at an early age.
Yeah. And that's something we would want to encourage very much. So an entrepreneurial track, our polytechnics are doing that, providing incubators, providing platforms for their students if they are interested in starting an enterprise, if they have an idea and they would like to commercialize an idea. So they provide incubators and various platforms for their students to get together and commercialize these ideas. And you have many polytechnic students, for example, who are doing that. Some of them would get a chance to do a degree, but they decide to defer their studies, even though they have a place in the university, to try out their businesses first. I met one of them who has a place in a university in America, and fully funded because the American university gave him a scholarship. And he had a business idea which he had started when he was in Polytechnic. He thought it was a good idea. He wanted to commercialize it and start a business. So he managed to get some angel funding. I think the co-founder of Skype is also one of his investors, and it has succeeded very well. His company is based in Silicon Valley. He travels a lot between America and Singapore, and he has deferred his university studies for more than 5 years. So he has a place, but he has deferred his university studies for so many years because he's enjoying himself so much and so passionate about his business.
This would beg the question if that university education is absolutely necessary in a case like that.
It's a relevant point, and I think each individual will have to decide for himself what his goals are, what his passions are, and whether or not they feel that the university education is important. And I think it speaks to the point that we should not be chasing after the piece of paper. That's not the important. You can have a university degree, and it's not the same as a university education. So we want to encourage our students, our young Singaporeans, to go for quality university education and not go for a paper chase. What's important is that you go for a quality education, you pursue your interests, and through that education you learn something and you fulfill your promise. And some people may feel that it's not the direction that they would like to go because they have other interests, and that's fine. Pursue those interests first, like starting up a business. And if later in life they find that they would like to get a university education, that opportunity will always be there, because there will be opportunities available later in life, whether to do a degree part-time or full-time.
BJ is joining us on the phone lines right now.
I'd like to point out that earlier on mentioned about the survey done recently, that private sector, the companies are making a comment that our graduates lack of drive and motivation.
Yes, that's right.
My view is that at that stage, our students, their mindset is more or less, I can't say fixed, but I feel that we should start all this at a younger age. Primary school, secondary schools.
So do you feel at this point perhaps none of that is being done at the primary and secondary level, ma'am?
I shouldn't say none of it has been done, but in my view, more can be done. I think our educational system has progressed a lot from the 80s to the 90s, but I think definitely more can be done from the classroom experience. I mean, nowadays, if you ask parents or even students, academic aspect is still number one. They spend a lot of time studying, passing their exams. C's is not enough. A's is better.
BJ, how many kids do you have?
I have two. One is in primary school, the other one K2.
And what's their experience been like, really like that? Much of a focus on academics. Are you able to, at home, try to expose them to different things, to help them build that drive, that creativity, and all of the things that you mentioned are desirable?
My elder one, he's in P4 this year, and I must say that homework takes up most of his time. And by the time he finishes his homework, then there'll be, okay, there's spelling, the Chinese, the English one, there'll be, okay, test coming. So there's a constant revision.
Right, I understand. Thank you very much for highlighting this, BJ. Mr. Wong, how can we begin this process of exposing our young to different aspects of living and life at a younger age? And this is a complaint that has been brought up many times by parents, that kids are so focused on academics because they have to be from a young age, and that's just not entirely healthy.
It's something that we are very aware of. We have received a lot of feedback about this, of course. And so, as BJ said earlier, it's something that you can't just do at the tertiary level. That has to start early from schools. And that's why when we look at schools and we look at changes in the school system, we have been focusing a lot on holistic education. We have been talking a lot about values and character education in schools. And we are looking at curriculum planning and making sure that it's not just about academics, it's not just about schoolwork, but also about CCAs, also about sports, also about values in action, meaning going out into the community to do projects with the community. And there are actually a lot of these activities happening in our schools, both in the primary and secondary school. I've been to many countries to visit school systems, not just the tertiary institutions, but also in their schools. Compared to many of these countries, our schools do a lot more in terms of sports, in terms of community projects. I think we also need the support of parents and the community and society at large to support this. Because as you said, are they doing this at home or in schools? But on the part of the schools, on the part of MOE, we'll have to have proper homework policies. We'll have to manage the amount of homework, the amount of requirements that the teachers impose on the students, and that we can manage within MOE's part, on the school's part. We have already announced or said something that we are requiring schools to set very clear homework guidelines, homework policies, so that parents are aware. We have also said that we would look at managing the curriculum better and then freeing up space for non-academic stuff like sports, like music, like community projects. It's a continuous process. These are changes which have been in place, and they continue to be an emphasis for us, for the ministry and for our schools. We hope that parents, that communities and society at large will support this and also understand the importance of holistic education. It's something that the schools cannot do alone. We need parents and we need the broader society to support this move towards holistic education.
I'm heartened that you talk about changing the nature of homework, because that could make a difference for so many people. I mean, we know that some degree of rote learning is required because you're learning the fundamentals at a very young age. But I mean, if you're talking about different experiences, presentations in class or oral experiences or heading outdoors, those could be unique learning opportunities for young people. We want to pick up some more calls right now. We've got Mr. Wong standing by with a question.
Yeah, I'd like to check with the ministry, right, if they can allow us to use our CPF to fund or co-fund our own studies. Because currently I'm reaching my 40s and I'd like to do my higher degree, but I'm lack of funding, so I'm trying to see if the ministry can look into this area to allow us to tap on our own CPF to fund or co-fund our own studies. Yeah.
We are aware of funding considerations, and we want to keep the pursuing of education, whether degree, diplomas, affordable for Singaporeans. Using CPF is somewhat of a constraint because we want to maintain CPF for retirement purposes, and that's the primary purpose of CPF. So there is a CPF scheme where parents can use their CPF to fund their children's education, but on the expectation that the monies will be returned to their parents' CPF account. So the use of CPF somewhat more difficult because we want to preserve CPF for retirement. But we try and find other ways in which we can make sure that pursuit of a degree education for adult learners is affordable, and we are doing that through various means. For example, by subsidization of the degree of the part-time degree. We have increased our subsidies for part-time degrees last year, and that's funded on a 55% subsidy rate today. We can do it through loans, subsidized loans. We can do it through other means. So if Mr. Wong has some particular concerns about the affordability of a part-time degree or the education that he's pursuing, perhaps he can contact MOE and we can look at what other means we can use to help him ensure that the education that he's thinking of pursuing is affordable.
Stay with us on Talkback Town Hall with Minister of State for Education and Defence, Lawrence Wong. Let's go to the phone lines now and speak with Lynette.
Yes, I would just like to make some suggestions. Education actually starts from young and from home and at home. So the parents could actually instill some values or, encourage the kids to pursue what they actually enjoy.
Lynette, how many kids do you have?
I don't have a kid.
Are you in contact with nieces and nephews? Or?
Yes, that's right. I'm the eldest in my whole family. Like a big sister to them. For me personally, I learned the most at home from my parents, and they have been a very good source of learning.
When you say learning, what are we talking about here? Values and things like that, right?
Experiences from their own lives. It means they share with me their growing up experience and how they pursue their own careers and pursue their own education because they had hard times last time.
How do you think the schools and the parents can work together on this?
I think the schools could engage the parents as well, maybe talks. I know that the schools have those parent-teacher meetings, but if there is some sharing session that they can go through, I think that's quite good as well.
Our guest on the program today is sharing with us some ideas about how university pathways and pathways to higher education also can be more clear and more focused, particularly if you are seeking certain opportunities. Mr. Wong, you are also chairing the Committee on University Education Pathways of the CUEP. Let's talk about that, because I understand that based on looking at overseas university models, that the CUEP is also said to be considering something known as a practice-oriented university pathway. What is this about? Because some universities have in terms of work attachment programs and whatnot.
We've been looking at university models in different countries. We have looked at Germany, Finland, France, America. And I think if you look at many of the university sectors in other countries, they have a balanced landscape between research universities and applied universities. Applied universities meaning that the whole approach to your university education is somewhat different. Instead of doing basic foundational research, they do more applied research. There are very close links with companies. They do applied research together with the companies. A lot more integration between work and study. So it's more than just a work attachment of 3 months, for example. But they have work-study programs where a student goes to the university and alternates between work and study, what they call a cooperative education. The whole approach to learning is quite different, much more project-based, much more applied in orientation and practice-based in orientation, and they learn in teams. We see this in what they call the University of Applied Sciences in Germany, for example, or in Finland. So when we look at our university landscape in Singapore, we don't quite have something like that. We have very strong research universities like NUS, NTU, but it's something that we thought would be useful to establish in Singapore, a model that we can develop in Singapore further.
Where would we see this, do you think? In one particular university only, or across the board in universities?
So it can apply both to existing institutions and also to think about whether we can create a new institution that would bring together elements of such a applied education pathway. Our existing universities are already doing many of these elements, whether it's work attachments, as you mentioned, whether it's applied research. They do have that. I think they can think about how they can strengthen these elements in their pedagogies and in their university programs. But we think that there's some scope to pull these elements together into one institution and to go further, much further into providing an applied pathway that's quite different, differentiated from our existing universities, a lot more focus on teaching, strong industry links, and even go for start a cooperative program, for example. And a cooperative program is different from a work attachment in the sense that a student would be alternating between work and study.
Do you think that this work experience could lengthen the university process? Right now it's 3 to 4 years. Could it be longer because of that?
It may well be, and in some universities that we have seen, having a cooperative program or a work-study program means that the university education takes slightly longer, 5 years, for example. But what's important is that it adds value to the student. And so when we went to an American university, Drexel University, which has a work-study program, the students take 5 years to finish their education. They alternate between 6 months of work and 6 months of study. But the experience that they get is very meaningful, and it adds to their learning, and employers value the experience that they go through. I talked to one of the students there, and I asked him, what makes it different for you, being part of this work-study program? Why didn't you just go for a normal 4-year degree? And this is a nursing student, and he said, he had one work attachment where he was in the hospital, he was attached to an emergency response team, and he was actually involved in rescuing somebody. And this is learning that cannot happen in a classroom.
You mentioned employers earlier. What is their response really to this practice-oriented university?
I think the employers are interested. They are keen to have something like that. But in the end, a lot of it would depend on implementation. The employers will look at, I'm sure, the quality of the students, and they will look at students that are the program and then the students coming out of this program to make sure that whether or not they meet their requirements. So what's important, I think, aside from the characteristics of the program, is that we work very closely with the employers and eventually implement a high quality program so that the students coming out from this program will be sought after, they will have skills which are relevant and in demand. But I think from the discussions we've had with employers so far, many of them are interested in an applied pathway, and they look forward to having graduates coming out from such a pathway.
We've got Raymond on the line now.
What I want to talk about is about school system. Our school system has all along been a very stressful, why? Because the principal always want to outdo another, and the principal drive the teachers crazy, and the teachers drive the students crazy. Because the better that they do, the more funding they will get. This is a very wrong way of doing things by the Ministry of Education.
Thank you very much for that, Raymond, saying that our educational environment might be overly competitive. Your response to that, Mr. Wong?
Well, I would like to assure Raymond that the ministry doesn't look at the performance of principals or teachers based on results, based on academic results. That's never been our basis of looking at the performance of a teacher or a principal, for that matter. So it's not because the ministry sets these performance requirements and therefore principals drives teachers to get better academic results.
Yet we are seeing that happen in local schools to some extent.
I think the teachers who are doing their best to try to push their students do it out of good intentions. They truly want their students to try their best, and they truly want their students to work hard and to have the discipline because these are important skills and these are important characteristics we want in our students. We want them to try, to push hard, and to really set their minds on doing problems, doing their homework, so that they develop a certain discipline, resilience for the future. And it's not so much about academic success, but developing these skill sets. We make sure, or we work very hard with our principals, with our teachers, to try and explain what we want from education, and I think our teachers want the best for their students. The concern that Raymond talked about, I think it's a concern that we've heard from parents. We want to get our principals and our teachers also engage parents better, so that I think one of the callers mentioned earlier the need for closer engagement with parents, and I think that's important, so that parents also understand what are the things that teachers are doing in schools. They understand that what we are doing in schools is not just about chasing after academic success, but about holistic education.
We do know that lots of parents want their children to get places in universities as well. Sometimes it is an aspiration. It could be the first university-going member of that family, for example. And a lot of people might face ceilings in a way, because some Singaporeans do feel that the presence of foreign students in local universities and polytechnics has resulted in their failure to secure that place in a faculty or even a university of their choice. What do you say about the proportion of foreign students in our local universities, and is that competition really?
And I would like to assure them that our priority is for Singaporeans, and that's why we are expanding university places for Singaporeans. When we look at university admissions, we look at admissions for Singaporeans first and foremost, and we fill up the places for Singaporeans. We do have international students in our universities, just like any other university. Our proportion of international students now is about 18%, and we are controlling the intake. The international students come in on a different basis, on top of the Singapore students. They do not compete directly with Singapore students for places. So we take in, it's a different pool, it's a different intake, and they are subject to more stringent admissions criteria. So our admissions process operates on the basis of us bringing in Singaporeans first, and then separately looking at bringing in international students. And the purpose of having international students is really to add to the diversity of the learning experience in university, to add to the vibrancy of campus life, which all universities do around the world. As I mentioned, our international student proportion is 18% of the student intake. It's comparable with what many universities around the world, with the proportions in many universities around the world. If you look at international student proportions in other universities, it ranges from 10% to sometimes over 20% in some universities. And I think we have to manage that intake, the international students. We have to manage the proportions in terms of integration of the student body, but we should not overdo it and reduce the international students to such a small number that it actually doesn't benefit our own Singapore students, because having international students in the university, that does benefit our Singapore students. It benefits them because our own Singaporean students can develop these international networks. They can benefit from a more diverse campus environment.
And perhaps we just need to work on integrating those international students into the local student
body. That's something that we recognize. I think more can be done in terms of integration, and we are getting our universities to do so.
Let's talk about the Singapore students now. The government hopes to add about 2,000 university places for Singaporeans by the year 2015. How do we ensure that the expansion of university places does not come at the expense of quality? Because while this was a welcome move, it's also become a point of contention.
I think there's been a lot of positive response to the expansion of the university sector, both the immediate expansion, 2,000 places, as you mentioned, and we are, as I said earlier, looking at further expansion beyond the 2,000 places. But at the same time, we have also received feedback highlighting concerns that if we go too far, the value of the university education may come down, which is something you mentioned. And we are very aware of these concerns because we have seen the experience of other countries where they have expanded their university places very rapidly without any regard to the quality and the value of university education. And when that happens, invariably you have graduates who come out who are unemployed initially or underemployed, meaning they do not do the jobs that they are hoping to do as university graduates. So we've seen these concerns in America and Europe, even in some Asian countries. The countries that I visited, many of them have shared these concerns with us as well. We are managing this, we are watching this carefully, and when we expand our university places, we will do so while maintaining quality.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Wong. Let's go to our phone lines to speak with Max. Max, I understand that you have a concern about Polytechnic students getting places in local universities.
I have two questions for Mr. Wong. The first one, he mentioned that Polytechnic student earlier who got funding and a scholarship from a U.S. university. He sounds like someone that we could have been proud of. Why have we lost him to a U.S. university? Why wasn't a Singapore university offering a place? Second question, why is there such a high turnover rate in the teaching profession? My daughter has had 3 math teachers alone this year.
Could you respond to his
Thank you, Max,
first
for the
point?
question. For the first point, we are expanding university places and there will be more opportunities for Polytechnic students to get a place in our local universities. I'm not sure what happened with that particular example I mentioned. He could have gotten a place in a local university, but he was obviously also good enough to get a place in an American university. But what we would like to assure Polytechnic students who are looking at upgrading themselves is that there will be more places for them in our local universities. They are free to apply to foreign universities too, of course. And if they do well, some of them may get a scholarship like this particular student I mentioned. But our local universities will also be providing more places and more scholarships for Polytechnic upgraders.
I think the concern is that the requirements for poly students are still very, very stringent as compared with the requirements, the prerequisites for A-level holders.
Well, I think that has changed. I mean, the balance has shifted, and over time you have seen better and better O-level graduates going into our polytechnics. O-level students who are eligible to go to junior colleges, more and more of them are choosing a polytechnic pathway precisely because they enjoy a more practice-based, hands-on learning. So with better O-level students, with better students going into our polytechnics, I think more students from the polytechnics will be eligible for university education.
Let's address Max's second point very quickly. He mentioned the high attrition rate in regard to teachers in schools.
Our overall attrition rate is under control. I mean, if you look at overall attrition rate amongst teachers, it's not any higher than the average attrition rate of the civil service employees or public service employees, for example. But we are quite mindful that we want to offer meaningful career pathways for our teachers. And that's not more than just remuneration, but it's also giving them meaning, doing other things to help them have productive careers in their teaching service. So that's something that we continuously watch over and we will continue to improve.
I think a lot of parents are concerned about continuity as well, because he did mention that his daughter has had, what, 4 teachers, a change 4 times in a short period.
And something I can well understand. So it's very unfortunate in his particular example, but I think we will continue to see how we can improve our retention rate of teachers.
Thank you very much, Minister of State Lawrence Wong.